Chrome-plated mechanical assassins crash through Brian Mason's bedroom windows, their razor-sharp appendages extending as they identify their 12-year-old target. Shards of glass rain across his Montana ranch bedroom as the killing machines lock onto his vital signs, their crimson optical sensors calculating optimal termination vectors. Brian scrambles backward, heart pounding, as his ordinary life shatters along with the windows. The peaceful routine of ranch living, already strange for an adopted city kid, dissolves into chaos as more huntermechs pour through the breach. Their articulated limbs click and whir, transforming into an arsenal of bladed weapons. A strange tingling sensation spreads through Brian's body, starting in his chest and racing along his nerves like electricity. His skin begins to glow with ethereal blue light, condensing and solidifying in his right hand. The energy coalesces into a crackling plasma blade, the legendary Shadow Blade, though Brian doesn't yet know its name or significance. The ceiling explodes inward as a figure in powered combat armor crashes through, landing in a protective stance between Brian and the mechanical assassins. "Stay behind me," commands a female voice. The warrior removes her helmet, revealing distinctly Kobali features, iridescent skin, and luminous eyes. "I'm Mina, your guardian." There's no time for a gentle explanation. "You're the son of the Kobali ambassador, hidden on Earth for your protection during our civil war." The mech's targeting systems register the activated Shadow Blade, and their combat protocols shift instantly from capture to termination. Their artificial intelligence networks designate Brian as a Priority 1 target, a hybrid child wielding one of the ancient Kobali weapons, precisely what their purest faction programmers consider an abomination. As the machines advance, Brian feels foreign memories flooding his consciousness, combat forms and blade techniques passed down through generations of Kobali warriors. His human physiology can only partially access this inherited muscle memory, but combined with his natural adaptability, it might be enough to survive. "Your father died ensuring you would inherit the Shadow Blade," Mina explains, activating her armor's weapon systems. "It bonds permanently with those of pure warrior bloodlines. The purists will never stop hunting you. Now we need to get off-world to the resistance forces." The first wave of huntermechs launches forward, their chrome bodies reflecting the blue glow of Brian's plasma blade. As his bedroom transforms into a battleground, Brian realizes he stands at a crossroads between his human upbringing and his newly discovered Kobali heritage. To survive this night and the war to come, he'll need both, along with every ounce of ingenuity he can muster. The mechanical assassins close in, their blades humming with lethal intent, as Brian assumes a defensive stance that feels both foreign and somehow familiar. A metallic screech filled the air as Brian deflected the first assassin's strike, the Shadow Blade's plasma field dissolving the mech's chrome appendage into molten droplets. Multiple targeting systems converged on his position as Mina's combat sensors blared urgent warnings. "More hostiles incoming," Mina announced, her armor's tactical display lighting up with new threat signatures. "Purist dropships entering atmosphere. We need to move." Brian backed toward his bedroom door. "My parents are part of my protection mission," Mina finished, unleashing a barrage of covering fire that temporarily scattered the huntermechs. "This way." They fought through the hallway, Brian's movements clumsy but effective. When a mech lunged with mathematical precision, he responded with an awkward sideways dodge that his human instincts suggested a move no Kobali warrior would attempt. The machine's combat algorithms faltered, unable to predict his unorthodox response. Brian brought the Shadow Blade down in a rough arc, splitting the assassin diagonally. A familiar voice rang out from the master bedroom. "Brian, get down." Brian dropped as his adoptive father James emerged, pulse rifle blazing. The weapon's electromagnetic bursts tore through two mechs, their systems overloading in cascading explosions. "Dad, you know about this?" Brian gasped. "Some." James ejected a spent power cell. "Your mother's activating the house defenses." On cue, panels slid open in the walls and ceiling. Energy turrets emerged, targeting the mechanical intruders with precision bursts. Sarah Mason appeared in the doorway, medical kit strapped to her back, typing commands into a concealed control panel. The house shuddered. Metal groaned overhead as something massive approached. The ceiling split open, revealing a towering machine that dwarfed the assassins. Its central eye focused on Brian, scanning the Shadowblade's energy signature. Devastator-class siege unit, Mina said. Specifically designed to. The machine's arm crashed through the remaining roof, forcing them to scatter. James grabbed Brian's shoulder and pulled him toward a painting on the wall. No time for the full story. Bunker now. Sarah pressed her palm to the painting's frame. A section of floor slid away, revealing stairs into darkness. They descended as the Devastator's sensors swept the house. The bunker was a reinforced chamber filled with supplies, weapons, and sealed containers marked with strange symbols. A small holocube sat on a central table, pulsing with soft light. "Message from your birth father," Sarah explained, checking Brian for injuries with practiced efficiency. "We've had it since." The bunker trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling as the Devastator began methodically destroying the ranch house above. Mina's armor communications crackled. "This isn't isolated. Multiple targets across Earth, other children like you. The purists are making their move against all human Kobali hybrids." "The tunnel system," Sarah said, moving to a reinforced door. "It branches out under the property. I helped design it." "My ship's concealed in the forest," Mina added, "but that siege unit's anti-aircraft grid makes extraction impossible until we disable its sensors." James checked his rifle's charge. "I can draw some attention away from your exit point. Those old combat drones in the barn might still work." The bunker shook again, more violently. Support beams creaked ominously. "Structural integrity at 40%, Mina reported. Multiple hunter mechs entering the tunnel network. Brian gripped the shadow blade tighter, its blue glow reflecting off the bunker walls. The foreign combat memories in his mind felt clearer now, more accessible. He wouldn't master them in minutes, but perhaps he could adapt them, combine them with his human instincts in ways the purists' machines couldn't predict. Sarah pulled open the tunnel door as another impact rattled the failing bunker. The dark passage ahead would be tight, forcing close-quarters combat with any mechs they encountered. Above them, the Devastator continued its relentless search pattern, each blast bringing their shelter closer to collapse. More warnings flashed across Mina's tactical display. "Additional Purist ships entering orbital trajectory. We need to move. Now." Brian took one last look at the holocube containing his birth father's message before following the others into the tunnel. The Shadowblade's light illuminated their path as distant mechanical sounds echoed through the underground network. Somewhere ahead, hunter mechs waited in the darkness. Behind them, the bunker's ceiling began to crack. A thunderous crack echoed through the bunker as another support beam gave way. Dust and debris rained down, coating Brian's shoulders as they pressed deeper into the tunnel network. "James, now." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Brian's adoptive father pulled a cluster of cylindrical devices from his tactical vest, reaching up through a ventilation shaft. With practiced precision, he activated the military-grade smoke grenades, sending them through the ranch's air circulation system. "That'll blind it temporarily," James said, dropping back down. "The Devastator's optical sensors can't penetrate this specific compound." The tunnels narrowed as they progressed, forcing them into single file. Brian found himself navigating the tight spaces with unexpected ease, his smaller frame allowing him to slip through gaps where the pursuing hunter mechs wedged themselves together, their chrome limbs tangling as they attempted to coordinate their attacks. "Left here," Sarah directed. her fingers trailing along nearly invisible markers she'd embedded in the tunnel walls. The secondary junction opens into gunfire erupted ahead. Brian raised the shadow blade, its blue light revealing a figure in tactical gear dropping from a maintenance shaft. The man dispatched 2 hunter mechs with precise bursts from a modified pulse rifle before turning to face them. "Marcus," Sarah breathed. "You got our signal." "Been monitoring the situation across the globe," Marcus Jones said, ejecting his rifle's spent power cell. "Similar attacks in 17 countries. The Earth Defense Network's been tracking Purist ship movements for the past 6 hours." The tunnel shook as the Devastator's massive feet impacted the ground above. Dirt trickled between support struts. 2 miles to the exit point," Sarah said, consulting a wrist-mounted holographic display. "But they'll be waiting." They moved faster now, Marcus taking point with James covering their rear. Brian found himself automatically processing tactical data angles of attack, defensive positions, optimal strike zones. The Kobali combat memories flowed more smoothly, integrating with his human instincts in ways that felt natural. The tunnel network opened into a larger chamber. Multiple hunter mechs dropped from overhead shafts, their targeting systems painting the group with crimson markers. Brian ducked under a blade strike, noting how the machine's movements followed rigid, predictable patterns. He slid between 2 mechs, forcing them to adjust their attack vectors. Their programming couldn't compensate fast enough. They collided, servos grinding. The shadow blade pulsed in Brian's grip. He rolled forward, slashing upward through one mech's knee joint, then pivoting to sever another's weapon arm. His human reflexes suggested moves no Kobali warrior would attempt, leaving the machine's combat algorithms struggling to adapt. They emerged from the tunnel network into pre-dawn forest. The temporary peace shattered as trees began toppling behind them. The Devastator had acquired their position. "Marcus, the charges!" James shouted. Marcus produced a set of compact explosives. He and James worked with military precision, setting their trap while Mina provided covering fire against pursuing hunter mechs. The massive war machine crashed through the tree line, its central eye scanning for targets. The explosives detonated in sequence, destabilizing the ground beneath the Devastator. As it struggled to maintain balance, Brian saw his opening. He sprinted forward, evading the machine's flailing limbs. The shadow blade guided his movements as he scaled the leg plating, identifying weak points in the armor. Brian struck precisely, severing hydraulic lines and power conduits. The Devastator's system screeched in protest as critical joints failed. He leaped clear as the machine toppled, its massive frame crashing into the forest floor. Their victory celebration died as Mina's armor sensors blared warnings. A massive ship broke through the cloud cover, its hull jam-packed with weapons. Drop pods began releasing from its belly, hundreds of them. "Planetary siege weapon detected," Mina announced, her voice tight. "Class VII prohibited technology." "The Defense Network bunker," Marcus said, checking coordinates on his tactical pad. 2 kilometers northwest. "We've got experimental anti-orbital weapons, but crossing open ground." The shadow blade flared suddenly, its energy field expanding. Brian gasped as new sensations flooded his nervous system. The blade's power signature interfered with nearby mechanical systems, causing hunter mechs to stutter and malfunction. "That's impossible," Mina whispered. The blade's interfacing with his human neural patterns. More drop pods streaked across the sky as they plotted their course to the bunker. Brian studied the shadow blade's pulsing light, feeling untapped potential in the connection between the ancient weapon and his hybrid physiology. "They're tracking his energy signature," Marcus said. "Every purist hunter on Earth will converge on this position. Then we use that," Sarah replied. "Give the other families a chance to escape." Brian nodded, raising the shadow blade as its disruption field grew stronger. Above them, the purist warship moved into attack position, its siege weapon powering up with ominous purpose. The purest warship's hull bristled with weapons, but Brian's attention fixed on the sudden change in his connection to the Shadow Blade. The weapon's energy field expanded further, creating ripples of interference that caused nearby hunter mechs to twitch and stutter. "Movement in the trees," Mina announced, her sensors tracking multiple signatures. "New contact-type Stalker-class units." Chrome figures emerged from the forest, their armor plates shifting color to match the surrounding vegetation. Unlike the brutal efficiency of standard hunter mechs, these moved with predatory grace. Their limbs ended in capture nets and containment fields rather than lethal weapons. "They're not trying to kill him anymore," Marcus observed, checking his tactical display. "They want him alive." A hidden door slid open in the hillside, revealing a camouflaged vehicle bay. Marcus keyed a sequence into his wrist computer, activating the facility's lights. Two modified military transports sat ready, their armor reinforced with experimental plating. "Sarah, James, take the first vehicle," Marcus ordered. "Draw their attention east. We'll make for the bunker in the second transport." Brian climbed into the armored transport with Marcus and Mina. The vehicle's enhanced suspension compensated for rough terrain as they accelerated through the forest. The Shadow Blade pulsed in Brian's grip, its energy synchronizing with the transport systems. New sensations flooded his awareness. He felt the electronic heartbeat of pursuing mechs, the complex patterns of their targeting systems. "Stop!" Brian shouted. Marcus slammed the brakes. Seconds later, 3 stalker units decloaked directly in their path, capture nets ready to deploy. The ambush would have caught them if Brian hadn't sensed their presence. "How did you know?" Mina asked as she opened fire through the transport's gun ports. "I felt them," Brian explained. "The blade. It's letting me detect their systems somehow." Movement caught their attention. A figure emerged from a concealed research facility entrance, waving urgently. The man wore a lab coat, his gray hair disheveled. "Dr. Weber," Marcus acknowledged. "Didn't expect to find you in the field. The purists forced my hand," Weber said, climbing aboard. "My research on Kobali technology couldn't wait any longer." He studied the Shadow Blade with intense interest. "Fascinating. Your hybrid DNA has unlocked capabilities we never thought possible." Pure Kobali warriors lack the neural plasticity to fully interface with the quantum properties of the sky, lit up as orbital weapons fire streaked toward Earth's surface. Precision strikes targeted military installations with devastating accuracy. "They've compromised our defense networks," Marcus growled, checking emergency transmissions. "Other hybrid families are under attack globally. We're spread too thin to protect them all." A squad of stalker mechs surrounded their position, closing in with synchronized movements. Brian felt the blade's energy surge. Acting on instinct, he pressed the weapon against the transport's power core. Energy cascaded through the vehicle's systems, creating a localized disruption field that caused the approaching mechs to malfunction. "There." Mina pointed to a group of figures pinned down by hunter mechs. "More hybrids." They rescued the trapped group, including 16-year-old Michael Torres, who had used technological dampeners to hide his Kobali heritage. The expanded team finally reached the defense network bunker, only to find infiltrator units tunneling beneath the facility's foundations. Brian and Michael discovered their abilities complemented each other. Their combined energy signatures created interference patterns that scrambled multiple hunter mechs simultaneously. The machines collapsed, their targeting systems unable to compensate. Weber analyzed data streaming across his tablet. The warship's main weapon, it channels massive energy through exposed conduits while charging. "That's a weakness, but their shields are impenetrable to conventional weapons." He looked at Brian. "However, your Shadow Blade's hybrid-enhanced properties might be able to disrupt their systems from within." The bunker's sensors detected a new arrival in orbit. A sleek command ship took position alongside the purest warship. "High Commander Vex," Weber said grimly. Your uncle, Brian. He believes destroying you will end the Kobali Civil War. Brian studied the Shadow Blade's pulsing energy field, then looked at the other hybrid children they'd rescued. Each demonstrated different manifestations of their mixed heritage. Michael could dampen energy signatures. Another could enhance electronic systems. Together, they represented capabilities the purists never anticipated. The warship's main weapon began charging again, its energy signature building to devastating levels. They needed to act quickly, but first they had to find a way past those shields. Brian shared a look with Michael, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The purists' obsession with genetic purity had left them vulnerable to abilities they couldn't comprehend. The bunker's warning klaxons cut through their tactical planning as new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Incoming vessel, the defense system announced. Kobali signatures detected. A streak of fire lit the pre-dawn sky as a scout ship screamed through the atmosphere, trailing plasma from multiple hull breaches. The vessel skipped off a mountainside before crashing in a shower of debris less than a kilometer from their position. Defense teams move, Marcus ordered, dispatching a rapid response unit. Brian felt the Shadow Blade pulse as they approached the wreckage. The weapon's energy field interfaced with the scout ship systems, revealing a single life sign within. The hull plates groaned as they peeled back, revealing a silver-haired figure in charred combat armor. Commander Jareth, Mina breathed, helping the resistance leader from the wreckage. The hybrids, Jareth gasped, gripping Brian's shoulder. Vex knows what you can do, what you represent. Inside the bunker's medical bay, Jareth revealed the truth the purists had discovered: human DNA could unlock unprecedented abilities in Kobali technology. Their genetic superiority rhetoric masked a deeper fear. The warship carries a purification weapon, Jareth explained as medical nanites repaired his injuries. It will eliminate human DNA from every hybrid on Earth. The process. He paused, eyes haunted. The deaths will be excruciating. Dr. Weber's fingers flew across his console, analyzing sensor data. 6 hours until the weapon achieves full charge. We have assets ready to move, Marcus said, bringing up a tactical display. Global defensive positions here, here, and here. We can coordinate a synchronized strike against their ground forces. Weber gestured to a row of experimental devices. Phase shift technology, unstable but it could bypass their shields. The power cells will only transport 5 people. Brian studied the gathered faces. Michael's ability to dampen energy signatures. Mina's combat expertise. Commander Jareth's knowledge of purist ships. Lieutenant Nash had just arrived from another bunker, but his infiltration skills would be essential. The bunker shook as another orbital strike impacted nearby. Long-range sensors showed Kobali resistance ships engaging purist reinforcements at the solar system's edge. No backup coming, Marcus noted. This is all we have. The phase shift devices hummed to life, enveloping the 5% team in quantum fields. Brian's stomach lurched as reality distorted. They materialized in a cargo hold, surrounded by towering stacks of supply crates. The Shadow Blade's energy field expanded, interfacing with the ship systems. Brian sensed fluctuating power signatures, gaps in the security grid. Engineering is 3 decks down, Jareth whispered. Nash and I can disable the engines. We'll handle the weapon, Brian replied. They split up. Brian led Michael and Mina through maintenance corridors, avoiding patrols by tracking electronic signatures through his connection to the blade. The weapon's energy output grew stronger as they ascended. Brian froze as they passed a sealed laboratory door. The blade's interface revealed biosignatures inside dozens of them. Other hybrids, he breathed, overriding the door controls. The lab held rows of containment pods. Hybrid children floated in suspension fields, connected to machines that probed their genetic structure. Medical displays showed active DNA sequencing in progress. "They're trying to isolate our abilities," Michael said, checking a nearby console. "Extract them somehow." The ship's speakers crackled. Intruders detected. Security protocols engaged. Bulkheads slammed shut throughout the vessel. Warning lights bathed the corridors in crimson. Brian's connection to the ship's systems revealed High Commander Vex on the bridge, initiating an emergency firing sequence for the partially charged weapon. Alarm signals blared as elite Purist troops materialized in nearby corridors, their matter transporters allowing rapid deployment. The hybrid children's various abilities began creating cascade effects through the ship's power grid. Systems fluctuated wildly as their powers resonated and amplified each other. Brian stared at the laboratory equipment, then at the sealed bulkheads separating them from both the weapon controls and the prisoner pods. The shadow blade pulsed urgently in his grip. They had minutes to decide: try to stop the weapon, save the prisoners, or attempt his risky plan to overload the genetic research systems. Time was running out. The weapon's charging sequence accelerated, while the trapped hybrid children's powers continued to destabilize the ship systems. Brian could feel the complex interactions building toward a critical point as Purist shock troops closed in on their position. Brian's eyes widened as the lab's medical displays revealed the horrifying truth: the captive hybrid children weren't just test subjects. Their neural patterns powered the purification weapon itself, their unique abilities amplifying its effects. Each power surge through the weapon's charging sequence drained more life from the suspended forms. "Emma," he breathed, recognizing Marcus's niece floating in one of the containment pods. Her fingers twitched as electronic signals pulsed through her connection points. The 16-year-old's ability to interface with computer systems had made her a priority target. The Shadowblade's energy field expanded, interfacing with Emma's pod systems. Through the connection, Brian sensed her consciousness weak but fighting. The other children's powers resonated with the ship's systems in complex patterns, creating rippling disruptions through the power grid. "Michael, can you create a dampening field around these pods?" Brian asked, studying the medical readouts. "We need to disconnect them from the weapon systems without killing them." Michael pressed his hands against the nearest containment unit. "I can block sections of the power grid, but not for long. The ship keeps rerouting around dead zones." Mina's rifle barked as Purist troops attempted to breach the sealed laboratory doors. "Whatever we're doing, we need to move fast. They're cutting through." A new figure materialized on the far side of the lab, a tall Purist in elaborate technical robes. Senior Technician Raven's augmented eyes whirred as he scanned Brian and the Shadowblade. "Fascinating," Raven said, studying his readings. "The weapon's neural integration, it's evolving, creating new pathways impossible in pure Kobali physiology." His lips curled in disgust. "Your hybrid mutations aren't random. They're targeted adaptations." The ship's speakers crackled with High Commander Vex's voice. "Deploy Hunter protocols. Purge all human genetic sequences." Clouds of silvery mist began seeping through the ventilation system, nanite swarms programmed to break down human DNA. The microscopic machine started eating through bulkheads and support structures, creating spreading zones of structural instability. "The medical bay on level 4, a familiar voice called through Brian's comm unit. "I've established a secure zone." "Dr. Weber?" Brian asked. "How did you?" Questions later. "The rescued children need immediate treatment. Their hybrid abilities are critically unstable." Michael's dampening field fluctuated as he fought to maintain control. "Brian, now." The Shadowblade's energy surged through the pod systems. Emma's eyes snapped open as Brian broke her neural connections. The other containment fields flickered and failed as Michael's power disrupted their control systems. Mina caught Emma as she stumbled from her pod. "Can you walk?" Emma nodded weakly, her fingers trailing across a nearby console. Displays flickered as her abilities automatically interfaced with the ship's systems. "The weapon." I can still feel it charging. The laboratory walls groaned as nanite swarms consumed support structures. New routes opened through the dissolving bulkheads as entire sections of the ship became unstable. "This way," Brian said, leading them through a partially dissolved maintenance shaft. Weber had converted an emergency medical bay into a triage center, nanoregenerators already prepared for the weakened children. "Their hybrid abilities are combining in unprecedented ways," Weber noted, studying his medical scans. "The quantum signatures are creating interference patterns throughout the ship systems." Brian felt it through his connection to the shadow blade waves of hybrid energy, disrupting the pure Kobali power signatures. The ship's automated systems struggled to compensate, creating cascading failures across multiple decks. "We don't need to destroy the weapon," Brian realized, watching the energy patterns interact. "We can reprogram it using our hybrid signatures." Emma's fingers danced across a medical console, interfacing with the ship's network. "The engine safeties have to be disabled first. Otherwise, the automated systems will purge any foreign energy patterns." "Jareth, Nash, are you in position?" Brian asked through the comm. "Approaching engineering now," Jareth replied. "But we've got new problems. Vex just called in reinforcements. A purist battle fleet is coming to finish what this ship started." The shadow blade pulsed as Brian integrated the tactical data. They had minutes before the weapon finished charging, and only hours until overwhelming purist forces arrived. But Vex's desperate tactics suggested something beyond mere hatred of hybrid genetics. The High Commander's fear hinted at possibilities even the hybrids themselves hadn't yet imagined. Mina finished modifying her combat armor, creating resonance points to channel the Shadowblade's energy. "Defense perimeter established, but those nanite swarms are getting thicker." The rescued hybrid children huddled together as their powers continued to interact and evolve. New abilities manifested as their quantum signatures merged and amplified. Brian watched the energy patterns building toward a critical threshold, knowing their next moves would determine not just their survival, but the future of human-Kobali relations. The ship's superstructure creaked ominously as more nanite swarms consumed vital support systems. Through the growing gaps in the hull, Earth's surface glittered far below, a reminder of everything at stake as they prepared to execute their desperate plan. Emma's fingers darted across the medical console as Brian channeled energy through the shadow blade. Interface cables snaked from her neural ports into the ship systems, creating backdoor access pathways through the weapons security protocols. "Got it," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. Auxiliary control nodes unlocked. Brian pressed his palm against the blade's crystalline surface, directing its energy into the weapon's core systems. Michael stood behind him, hands outstretched as his dampening field blocked the ship's automated security responses. A thunderous impact shook the deck. Chrome-plated figures burst through the dissolving bulkheads, their augmented armor gleaming under emergency lighting. At their head strode Major Thorne, his cybernetic eyes glowing crimson as they tracked the hybrid energy signatures. "Defensive positions," Mina shouted, her modified combat armor humming as it channeled excess energy from Brian's blade. The Chrome Brigade opened fire. Mina dove behind a medical station, returning fire as Michael redirected his dampening field to shield the wounded children. Two brigade members flanked left while Thorne advanced straight down the center, his augmented systems adapting to the disruptive hybrid energies filling the air. "Weber, get them out of here," Brian called, maintaining his connection to the weapons systems. The doctor herded the children toward maintenance access panels. "This way. Stay together." Thorne's arm transformed, revealing integrated weapon systems. "Your genetic aberrations end here." His targeting systems compensated for the ship's fluctuating gravity as he fired precision bursts. Brian felt the weapon systems accepting his energy input, but the process strained his body. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed more power through the connection. Mina's armor helped distribute the load, creating a feedback loop that stabilized the energy flow. The ship's speakers crackled with Jareth's voice. Engine room breached, but these defense systems are adapting faster than we can shut them down. The containment field is destabilizing. Through his neural link, Brian sensed new presence in the weapons control systems. Senior Technician Raven had bypassed Emma's security blocks, his fingers flying across engineering controls. "The hybrids must not survive," Raven transmitted. "Their existence threatens everything." Emma screamed as Raven's countermeasures slammed through her neural connection. Brian split his focus, trying to maintain the weapon reprogramming while defending against the digital assault. The other hybrid children joined hands, forming a circuit that channeled their abilities into Emma's interface. The ship's quantum core pulsed erratically, unable to compensate for the competing energy patterns. Artificial gravity failed in sections, sending equipment floating as life support systems fluctuated. Warning klaxons blared as structural integrity dropped to critical levels. Purity's Price Protocol initiated. High Commander Vex's voice echoed through the ship. Core overload sequence engaged. Thorn pressed his assault, driving wedges between the team members. His chrome-plated troops forced Mina to defend multiple angles, while Michael struggled to maintain his protective field around the evacuating children. Brian's connection to the weapon wavered as he divided his attention between too many threats. The core's energy signature, Emma gasped through her neural link. It's building toward critical mass. Brian studied the quantum readings through his blade interface. The hybrid children's combined abilities had created energy patterns that defied the ship's regulatory systems. If they could channel that chaotic potential at precisely the right moment. "Everyone, link up," he transmitted. "We need perfect synchronization." The hybrid children formed a circle, their abilities resonating through Emma's interface. Mina's modified armor pulsed as it joined the energy circuit. Michael extended his dampening field in precise patterns, creating channels for the power to flow. Thorn's chrome troops breached their final defenses as the quantum core's containment field began to collapse. The entire ship groaned, internal structures warping as hybrid energy patterns collided with pure Kobali systems. Through it all, Brian held his connection to the weapon's core, preparing to redirect the building power. The Shadowblade blazed with accumulated energy as hybrid abilities merged into a single unified force. They had one chance to transform the weapon before the ship tore itself apart. Success or failure would be measured in microseconds as competing energies reached their peak. "Now," Brian called, channeling power through the Shadowblade as quantum readings spiked into critical zones. The hybrid children moved as one, forming a circle around Brian in the weapon chamber. Emma's neural connectors snaked outward, linking each child into a unified network. Her fingers trembled as she established the final connections, face pale from the strain. "Neural mesh stable," she whispered through gritted teeth. "Beginning power synchronization." The deck plates beneath them vibrated as multiple breaching charges detonated. Chrome Brigade troops poured through newly created entry points, their augmented armor allowing them to move through the destabilized gravity fields. Major Thorn stepped through the central breach, his cybernetic eyes adjusting to track the surging energy signatures. "Nash, status on those stabilizers." Mina called through her comm as she directed covering fire at the advancing troops. "Final connections complete," Nash's voice crackled back. "But these containment fields won't hold much longer." Michael's hands moved in precise patterns as he maintained the dampening field while simultaneously creating channels for the building energy. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the strain of precise power manipulation. Dr. Weber worked his way around the circle of children, medical scanner humming. Hybrid nervous systems are adapting to the power load. Brian's neural architecture is actually reconfiguring to handle the increased flow. The shadow blade pulsed, its crystalline surface fragmenting into multiple energy projections. Each shard flew to one of the hybrid children, transforming into weapons sized for their smaller hands. The children's eyes widened as they felt the connection to the ancient Kobali technology. Phase shift generators deploying, Thorne announced. His troops activated devices that caused their forms to flicker and partially pass through the hybrid energy barriers. Through the weapons systems, Brian sensed High Commander Vex establishing a direct neural link from the bridge. The ship's safety protocols disengaged as Vex manually accelerated the core overload sequence. Emma gasped. The virus Raven just released something into the system. Red warning symbols cascaded across nearby displays as Raven's anti-human virus invaded the ship's computers. But as it encountered the hybrid neural patterns flowing through Emma's network, the virus's code began to mutate and shift targets. "It's attacking the pure Kobali systems now," Emma reported, fingers dancing across interface panels. "The virus is evolving." The quantum core's containment field fluctuated wildly as competing energies built toward critical mass. Brian felt the shadow blade fragments resonating through the circle of children, creating harmonics that interfaced directly with the weapon systems. Through their shared neural connection, Brian sensed Vex's consciousness as the hybrid energy patterns washed through the commander's mind. The purest leader's iron certainty wavered as new possibilities opened before him. "The weapon's transformation matrix is adapting," Weber announced, studying his readings. "These energy signatures they're creating some kind of stabilization field." Chrome Brigade troops pushed forward through zones of shifting gravity, their phase generators allowing them to briefly bypass the hybrid defenses. The children raised their shadow blade fragments in unison, channeling power through the weapons as Brian had shown them. Arcs of energy crackled between the blade fragments, forming a lattice of power that forced the phase-shifted troops back into normal space. Mina used the opening to direct precise fire at their temporarily vulnerable forms. The quantum core's warning sirens reached a fever pitch as energy levels exceeded theoretical maximums. Through the neural network, Brian felt the hybrid children's abilities synchronizing, ready to redirect the immense power surge building in the ship's heart. Vex's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, but this time it held a note of uncertainty. "What are we becoming?" Brian centered himself within the circle of children as the quantum cascade began. The shadow blade fragments hummed in harmony, waiting to channel the power that would determine the future of two species. Energy built to impossible levels as the final sequence initiated. The weapon chamber blazed with unleashed quantum potential as the core's containment fields reached their breaking point. Time seemed to slow as Brian prepared to direct the greatest energy surge in human Kobali history through the circle of hybrid children. Blue-white energy erupted from the quantum core, flooding through Emma's neural network and into the circle of hybrid children. Brian's transformed shadow blade pulsed in response, its crystalline surface fragmenting into perfect geometric patterns that matched the rhythm of the children's heartbeats. The weapon chamber filled with swirling light as Brian's nervous system adapted to channel the massive power surge. "Neural patterns stabilizing," Weber called out, his medical scanner tracking the changes. "Their systems are synchronizing." Thorne raised his augmented arm, targeting systems locked on Brian. "Chrome Brigade, phase shift and eliminate the primary target." The elite purist soldiers activated their shift generators, their forms flickering as they attempted to bypass the hybrid energy field. Instead of passing through, they slammed into an impenetrable barrier of quantum energy. Their cybernetic systems sparked and sputtered, forcing them back. "Fall back," Thorne ordered as two of his soldiers dropped to their knees, their augmentations malfunctioning under the hybrid field's influence. Jareth to weapon chamber, the comm crackled. Core containment modifications complete. You've got stable power flow. The ship's superstructure groaned as more nanites consumed vital support beams. Weber rushed to help the most critically wounded children toward the escape pods. These sections won't hold much longer. Mina's combat armor hummed as it integrated with the hybrid energy field, projecting a protective barrier around the remaining team. The blue-white energy from the children's circle flowed through the armor's power matrix, strengthening its defensive capabilities. Through the ship's neural interface, Brian felt High Commander Vex's consciousness brush against his own. The Purist leader's rigid certainty cracked as hybrid energy patterns cascaded through his mind, showing him visions of possibilities he'd never imagined. The weapon's energy signature shifted, its original purpose transforming under the influence of the hybrid network. Where it once sought to destroy hybrid DNA, it now generated stabilizing fields that enhanced genetic fusion between human and Kobali sequences. Emma's hands trembled as she maintained the neural connections. The network's holding, but ship's AI is trying to shut us down. Michael's fingers traced complex patterns in the air as he expanded his dampening field, blocking automated responses. Focus on the transformation. The quantum core's energy surged through the hybrid network in waves of increasing intensity. Each pulse rewrote the base programming of nearby nanite swarms, converting them from destroyers to stabilizers. The transformed nanites spread through the ship systems, their new directives propagating through the collective. Thorne staggered as the energy wave washed over him. His cybernetic eyes flickered, display systems filling with cascading data as his augmentations began integrating with his biological systems in unprecedented ways. The rigid purist technology adapted, accepting rather than rejecting the hybrid influence. Brian's nerve endings tingled as the shadow blade merged completely with his nervous system. The weapon became an extension of his consciousness, transforming into something neither purely human nor Kobali. Through this new connection, he sensed similar changes spreading throughout the ship systems. Structural integrity at 15%, Nash reported. We need to complete the transformation before the ship breaks apart. The hybrid children swayed, their energy reserves depleting as they maintained the transformation field. Emma's neural interface sparked, her vitals dropping as she pushed herself to keep the network stable. The ship's quantum signature is evolving, Michael observed, studying the energy patterns. But we're losing power to maintain the field. Vex's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, carrying new understanding. The genetic purification protocols. They were wrong. What we're becoming. It's beyond anything we imagined. Brian channeled more power through his shadow blade, supporting the failing hybrid network. The ship's remaining systems fluctuated between pure Kobali technology and hybrid adaptations as the transformation spread. But time was running out as the vessel's structure continued to deteriorate around them. The deck plates buckled beneath their feet as another section of hull plating gave way. Through gaps in the ship's armor, Earth's atmosphere beckoned. The team had precious minutes to complete the transformation before explosive decompression claimed them all. Brian inhaled sharply as the ship's structure groaned around them. Through his neural connection to the shadow blade, he sensed the vessel's imminent collapse. The hybrid children's energy wavered, their faces pale with exhaustion. Emma, maintain the neural mesh. Everyone, prepare for full interface. Brian plunged the shadow blade into the deck plating, establishing a direct connection to the quantum core through Emma's network. Energy surged through his nervous system as he linked with each hybrid child simultaneously. The weapon chamber erupted in brilliant light as their combined abilities created a sustaining energy loop. The deck trembled as High Commander Vex burst through the chamber doors. His cybernetic implants gleamed as he rushed to the main control interface, fingers flying across the panels. "Initiating command override Alpha 7, Vex announced, his voice carrying new understanding. Redirecting structural integrity fields. The transformed nanites responded to his authority codes, but their programming had evolved. Instead of maintaining pure Kobali systems, they began integrating hybrid patterns into the ship's infrastructure. Damaged support beams reformed with crystalline lattices that pulsed with both human and Kobali energy signatures. Major Thorn's chrome-plated fingers twitched as hybrid energy coursed through his augmentations. His targeting systems shifted, identifying the children not as threats but as vital power nodes. Chrome Brigade, Defensive Formation Delta, protect those kids. Thorn's troops moved with mechanical precision, their combat suits resonating with the transformation wave. Energy arced between their armor plates, creating auxiliary conduits for the stabilizing field. "Core containment stabilizing," Jareth's voice crackled through the comm. "Nash, synchronize the pulse modulation." "Already on it," Nash replied. "Quantum signature adapting to hybrid patterns." Now, the ship's background hum changed pitch as the core's containment field transformed. Blue-white energy merged with amber Kobali power in perfect harmony, creating stable hybrid matrices throughout the vessel's systems. Dr. Weber circled the children, his medical scanner humming. "Incredible. Their genetic structures are actually strengthening under the field's influence. Emma, are you seeing this?" Emma's eyes were closed in concentration as she maintained the neural network. Broadcasting stabilization pattern shipswide. "The other hybrids. I can feel them changing." The ship's AI flickered to life on nearby displays, its interface patterns shifting from rigid Kobali geometry to fluid hybrid forms. Status reports scrolled past in both human and Kobali script as the AI adapted its core protocols. Brian felt the shadow blade pulse in response to the ship's transformation. The weapon's crystalline surface flowed like liquid metal, permanently bonding with his nervous system. Energy cascaded through the blade fragments still connected to the hybrid children, creating a self-sustaining circuit of power. "Hostile ships approaching," the transformed AI announced, its voice a blend of synthetic and organic tones. "Purist battle group detected." High Commander Vex stepped into the center of the weapon chamber, his neural link to the ship's system still active. "Transmitting transformation data to the fleet. They need to see the truth." Through the viewing portals, the Purist vessel's weapon signatures powered down as they received Vex's transmission. The proof of successful hybridization demonstrated in every cell of the transformed ship spread through their command network. Jareth's voice came through clearer now on the stabilized comm systems. "Resistance fleet is standing down. The Civil War. It's over." The hybrid children lowered their blade fragments as the transformation wave completed its sweep through the ship. Brian rose from his kneeling position, the shadow blade humming with newfound power. Through the newly reinforced hull, Earth's blue horizon curved beneath them, untouched by the conflict that had nearly torn two species apart.